In 2014, researchers at Harvard and the University of Virginia gave people a simple choice. Sit alone in a quiet room with your own thoughts for 15 minutes, or press a button and shock yourself with real, physical, electric pain. 67% of the men in the study pressed the button. Some of them did it more than once. That number should stop you cold, because it means something darker than loneliness was sitting in that room with them. We tell ourselves a comfortable story about why that happens. We call it loneliness. We say the mind gets restless without company, without noise, without someone to talk to. But loneliness doesn't explain what happened in that room, because every single person in that study was completely safe, completely fine, with absolutely nothing wrong. And their brains still chose pain over silence. The truth hurts more than the shock did, because what they were running from wasn't emptiness. It was something inside them. Somewhere in your life, you felt it too. That sudden tightness in your chest. The moment the apartment goes quiet, the urge to turn on the television, not because you want to watch it, but because the silence feels unsafe. The way your thumb finds your phone before your mind even decides to move it there. You've called this loneliness. Most people do. But what if the thing you've been fighting your whole life was never about missing people at all? Here is the contradiction almost no one talks about. Loneliness is what you feel when you're surrounded by people and still feel unseen. But this racing heart, this shallow breath, this desperate need to fill the silence, this happens most violently when you are completely alone, with no one to misunderstand you at all. Two different pains, two different origins, and most of us have spent our entire lives treating them as one. Carl Jung noticed this distinction over half a century before neuroscience could prove it. Jung wrote that loneliness does not come from having no people around you. It comes from being unable to share what feels important to you, from holding something inside that others cannot or will not receive. But there is another kind of dread Jung spent his life circling. Not the ache of being unseen by others, the terror of being left alone with yourself, with no one there to perform for, explain yourself to, or hide behind. That terror has a name, a mechanism, and a root, and none of it is what you've been told. So let's go there together. Nothing to loneliness, you already understand that one. Let's go into the quieter, more dangerous fear hiding underneath it. The fear of being alone with your own mind. Because once you understand where it actually comes from, you'll stop trying to fix it the way everyone told you to, and you'll finally understand why filling your life with people never made it go away. It starts with a woman in the back of a rideshare car and a silence she couldn't survive. She was a senior attorney at one of the top firms in her city, composed in courtrooms, unshakable under pressure. Her colleagues described her as the calmest person in any crisis. But every single day, the moment she stepped into a rideshare car alone, something in her chest would tighten before the driver had even pulled away from the curb. It wasn't the traffic, it wasn't exhaustion. It was something far older, waiting for the noise to stop. She had a pattern, though she never named it as one. The instant that door closed and the engine started, she reached for her phone. Emails, messages, anything. If her phone were dead, she'd strike up a conversation with the driver about nothing at all. She filled her calendar the same way. Dinners, calls, favors for friends she barely had energy for. Because an empty hour felt to her like standing at the edge of something. For years, she believed this made her driven. It didn't. It made her afraid of one very specific thing. One evening, her phone died 2 minutes into the ride. No charger, no signal, just her, the hum of the engine, and 40 minutes of unfilled silence stretching out ahead of her. Within moments, her heart was pounding, her palms went damp, A wave of grief rose so suddenly it startled her. Grief she hadn't let herself feel in 18 months, since the night she signed her divorce papers and went straight back to the office. The silence hadn't created that grief. It had simply stopped hiding it.
She realized in that back seat that she had never actually grieved her marriage. She had outrun it, one email, one dinner, one distraction at a time. Her productivity was never ambition. It was a shield, built the moment silence became unbearable, held up every single day so she'd never have to sit with what the divorce had actually done to her sense of who she was. This is the part almost no one is told. Busyness isn't the opposite of pain. It's a very sophisticated way of postponing it. She didn't fix everything that night, but she did something she hadn't done in over a year. She let the ride finish in silence. No phone, no small talk. Just her and the grief she'd been outrunning. It was the first small piece of evidence for her that silence wasn't actually dangerous. It only felt that way because she had never once let it finish what it was trying to say. Her story isn't rare. It's a preview of a mechanism running quietly inside millions of people, and understanding it starts with a distinction almost no one makes correctly.
Here's the sentence that changes everything. What you call the fear of being alone and what psychologists call loneliness are not the same disorder. They don't even come from the same part of the brain. Loneliness is what happens when your relationships don't match what you need. But the panic you feel in an empty apartment has a different name entirely. Autophobia, the fear of solitude itself. Which means the thing that's been ruining your quiet evenings for years might not be about your relationships at all.
Loneliness is a slow ache.
It builds over days, weeks, sometimes years of feeling unseen, even when you're surrounded by people. Autophobia is different. Sharp, sudden, physical. It arrives the second the door closes and the room goes quiet. Racing heart, shallow breath. A wave of certainty that something bad is about to happen, even though nothing is happening at all. Which means the person who feels perfectly fine at a crowded party can be the same person who cannot survive 20 quiet minutes alone.
This distinction matters because you cannot treat a phobia the way you treat loneliness.
You can't fix autophobia by getting more friends, more dates, more plans. Clinicians classify it as a specific situational phobia, the same category as the fear of heights or enclosed spaces, which means the empty room isn't dangerous. Your nervous system has simply been convinced that it is. And to understand why your nervous system believes that lie, we have to go back further than your last relationship. We have to go back to the very beginning of how you learned to be a self.
Psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott studied children for decades,
and neuroscience still confirms what he found. The ability to be alone isn't innate. It's taught, paradoxically, in the presence of another person. He called it the capacity to be alone in the presence of the mother. Which means your relationship with solitude was being built before you could even speak.
When a caregiver stays consistently present and attuned,
a child's mind absorbs that presence, internalizing it, until they no longer need them physically there to feel safe. That caregiver becomes an inner sense of safety, carried alone into any quiet room for life. But when that early presence is inconsistent, intrusive, or not attuned enough, something very different gets built instead.
When that early presence was unreliable,
sometimes warm, sometimes absent, the child never fully internalizes safety. No steady inner lantern forms. Instead, the nervous system learns that safety only exists when someone else is near. Alone becomes, at the deepest level, unsafe. This is why, decades later, an empty apartment can feel less like solitude and more like abandonment.
This is where the trap snaps shut. When early safety is fractured or unpredictable, your nervous system learns a terrifying baseline rule. You only exist if there is an observer. Without someone there to reflect you, validate you, or react to you, your sense of self begins to blur. You don't seek out constant company because you are full of love for the world. You seek it because without an anchor, you feel like you are drifting out to sea. Which means your frantic social planning was never a lifestyle choice. It was a survival strategy.
Look closely at your own choices, and the data bears this out with chilling precision. When the brain treats solitude as an active threat, your standards for companionship completely collapse. You begin to accept partners who are emotionally cold, unavailable, or outright toxic. Not because you lack self-respect, and not because you are blind to the warning signs, but because, to a drowning nervous system, a broken life raft looks identical to a safe shore. You didn't choose them because you loved their presence. You chose them because you could not survive their absence. Otto Kernberg called this identity diffusion, a fragmented sense of self that struggles to hold together without external validation. Your identity becomes fluid, adapting to whoever enters the room. You become a chameleon, performing for anyone, simply to avoid looking in the mirror and confronting the terrifying emptiness beneath the roles you play. And when that audience leaves, the curtain drops on a stage that suddenly feels empty.
Perhaps you've noticed this in yourself. The strange relief when a text message finally arrives. The way your shoulders soften the moment someone walks into the room. The quiet dread of an empty weekend stretching ahead. None of this means you're weak, needy, or broken. It means your nervous system is still protecting a younger version of you that never fully experienced what safety felt like. But waiting isn't the same as being unable. And that difference is where the real hope in this story begins.
The story isn't over at attachment. Underneath the psychology is something more physical. A live, measurable, biological event happening inside your skull the moment silence begins. And it explains why this fear feels less like sadness and far more like danger. To understand that, we have to go inside the brain itself, into a threat system that evolved for a world that no longer exists.
For most of human history, physical separation from the group wasn't an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. No protection from predators, no help if injured. Ancestors who felt calm alone in the dark didn't survive long enough to pass that calmness on. The ones who panicked did. Which means the terror you feel in a quiet room isn't a personal flaw. It's an inheritance.
That ancient alarm lives in a small, almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. It doesn't reason or consider context, it just scans for threat. When your apartment goes silent, it doesn't register peaceful evening. It registers separated from the tribe and hits the emergency switch, which means the racing heart you've mistaken for loneliness might actually be your body preparing to fight a predator that was never there. Once that alarm fires, your body floods with cortisol and norepinephrine, the same chemicals that prepare you to run from a real threat. Shallow breath, tight chest, an urgent need to escape. With no other explanation, your mind reaches for the nearest label: loneliness. But loneliness didn't cause this. Your amygdala did. This single misdiagnosis is why so many people have spent years chasing the wrong cure. There's a second brain network involved. It's why silence doesn't just feel dangerous, it feels unbearably loud. It's the default mode network, activating the moment your attention has nothing to hold on to. In an anxious mind, it becomes a repetition machine, replaying old wounds with nowhere to go. Which means the moment you stop distracting yourself isn't when your mind goes quiet. It's when it starts talking the loudest.
Brain scans show that people who fear solitude
have unusually strong, locked-in connectivity within this replay network, and weakened connection to the brain region that shifts attention on purpose. In plain terms, a loud memory reel and a broken remote control they can't change. Which explains something that has probably confused you your entire life. Why simply trying to think positive in a quiet room has never once worked.
The default mode network is one of the most energy-hungry systems in the brain. Being trapped in it isn't just emotionally painful, it's physically depleting. That's why an hour of silence can leave you more drained than a full day of meetings. Your brain wasn't resting, it was working overtime, which means your exhaustion after a quiet weekend was never laziness. It was your brain running a marathon with the lights off.
By now, the picture should be clearer. An ancient threat system misfiring. A memory network stuck on repeat. Neither was ever about not having enough friends. But there's one more layer beneath this. The actual content that the looping memory reel is trying and failing to process. Because silence doesn't just trigger fear, it goes looking for something specific, buried, and unfinished. Psychologists call it experiential avoidance, the mind's strategy of pushing away anything too painful to face. Grief, shame, old regret. When you're busy and distracted, these feelings stay sealed away. But solitude removes the seal. There's nothing left to distract you from what's actually inside. Which means the panic in the silence was never really about the silence. It was about what the silence finally had room to show you. Psychologist Edward Higgins called this self-discrepancy, the painful gap between who you are and who you feel you're supposed to be. In company, that gap gets papered over by roles and performance. Alone, with no audience left, the gap becomes the only thing in the room. Which is why so many high-achieving, outwardly successful people report the most intense anxiety not during failure, but during rest. This is exactly what was happening to the attorney from earlier. Her calendar wasn't ambitious, her phone wasn't connected. They were experiential avoidance, engineered to keep her sealed jar undisturbed. When her phone died, the seal broke, and 18 months of unprocessed grief finally surfaced. Which means the busiest person you know may not be thriving. They may simply be the most afraid of what would happen if they stopped. In the same study where people shocked themselves rather than sit with their thoughts, the ones who chose the pain weren't outliers. They were ordinary adults, reporting that quiet thinking was simply too hard to bear, their minds wandering towards something unbearable enough to prefer real pain instead. Which means, somewhere along the way, silence stopped being peaceful for an entire generation and started being something to escape at any cost.
This is the part that should give you hope. Acceptance-based therapy shows that when people stop fighting these sensations and instead learn to simply observe them, the intensity of the fear consistently drops. Not because the feeling disappears, but because the fight against it finally stops. Which means the goal was never to stop feeling anything alone. It was to stop being afraid of what you feel. Before we get to healing, we need to look at the modern tool that has made this entire problem harder to recognize than ever before. Look no further than the small rectangle of glass resting within arm's reach of your hand. We have built a world where almost no one has to sit with their own mind for very long. The moment silence begins to settle in, our hand reaches for distraction, often before we even realize we've made the choice. We think we are connecting with the world, but we are actually fleeing an internal executioner. The average American now spends over 5 hours a day on their phone. For younger adults, it's closer to 6.5. For many people, that phone begins to function like a portable emotional refuge, offering the sense of comfort once associated with a caregiver. When the room grows quiet and discomfort begins to surface, that same ancient alarm from before
The screen flashes. It whispers that you are seen, that you are relevant, that you are not alone. It gives you the comfort of connection without the vulnerability real connection requires. Every notification promises relief, but never the healing your nervous system is really searching for.
But this digital sanctuary is a devastating trap. Every time you pull out your phone to escape a quiet moment, you confirm your brain's worst fear. You tell your nervous system, "You were right. The silence was lethal. Thank God we escaped." By avoiding the fire, you ensure you never discover that it has no heat. The relief feels like a cure, but it is actually the very mechanism that keeps the phobia alive. The tool you believe is saving your sanity every night is the exact reason your fear never grows smaller.
Let us be entirely honest about the space we are occupying together right now.
Even this video, this deep exploration of your shadow, this analysis of your nervous system, can function as the same trap. Watching a solitude essay is not the same as practicing it. Learning the mechanics of your cage can feel like freedom, but it is just a comfortable way to pass the time inside it. If you close this tab only to open another window of noise, then this voice was just another layer of armor.
Here's the truth this video has been building toward.
No amount of watching or understanding changes your relationship with solitude. Only one thing does. The method proven again and again for every phobia ever studied. Controlled, repeated, gradual exposure to the very thing you've been running from. Not forever, not all at once, just longer than yesterday.
In exposure therapy for autophobia,
The process is disarmingly simple. 10 minutes alone, no phone, no TV. When the anxiety naturally fades, and it always does, the time slowly increases. 30 minutes, an hour, longer. Each round teaches the amygdala what childhood never did. Nothing bad happens here. This is not about willpower. It's about giving your nervous system the missing evidence it's been waiting its whole life to receive.
there's a myth worth destroying, that finding the right partner will cure this fear. It won't. A partner can soothe the symptom, but can't repair the underlying architecture. That's why so many people carry this same terror into marriage after marriage without it ever actually resolving. Which means the fix was never a person. It was always, quietly, you. Here's a second myth worth destroying. This isn't an introvert's problem or an extrovert's strength. Attachment security has nothing to do with how social you are. Quiet people can have rock-solid capacity to be alone. Loud, social people can be silently terrified of it. Personality was never the factor. It was always whether, somewhere back in the beginning, someone taught your nervous system that safety could live inside you too. If this has been you, the phone reach, the overfull calendar, the racing heart in a quiet room,
Here's the recalibration worth remembering. It was never proof that something is wrong with you. It was an old, outdated alarm system doing exactly what it was built to do. The good news is that alarms can be recalibrated. This one is no different.
a 2023 study quietly overturns what culture tells us about solitude.
Researchers tracked people's moods across weeks and found something precise. Chosen solitude and forced solitude produce completely different outcomes. When solitude is autonomous and self-selected, its negative effects on mood and stress nearly disappear, which means the room was never the enemy. The feeling of being trapped in it was.
This is what Winnicott meant by the capacity to be alone. Not isolation, not withdrawal,
A quiet, internal sense that you're safe enough to sit inside your own mind without needing to escape it. It's not something you're born with. It's something you can still build, slowly. And that brings us back to a room, a woman, and a silence she once couldn't survive.
The attorney from earlier didn't transform overnight.
She started small, 10 minutes, phone in another room once a day. Some days were unbearable, some almost peaceful. Slowly, month by month, the racing heart softened into something closer to quiet company, her own. She never stopped being busy, she just stopped being afraid of what happened when she wasn't.
So let's return to where we began. 67% of men in that Harvard study chose pain over sitting quietly with their thoughts. Knowing what you now know, that number shouldn't feel strange. It should feel familiar, a mirror of every time you reached for your phone. But now you know something they didn't have language for in that moment.
The fear was never really about being alone. It was about being alone with everything you never had the chance to feel, name, or finish.
The apartment isn't dangerous. The silence isn't empty. What you've been running from was simply you. Never as unbearable as your nervous system believed. That's not a flaw to fix. It's an old story, finally ready to end.
You don't need to fill every silence for the rest of your life. You don't need someone in every room to prove you're safe. Somewhere inside you is the same steady presence Winnicott described, quiet, waiting. It was never missing. It was only waiting for you to notice.